Disclaimer. This video contains spoilers for Yosuke's social link in P4 and Yusuke's social link in P5. You have been warned. Hello and welcome to Every Persona Explained, where we take a look at the origin and representation of every persona. I'm your host Winright, and today we're taking a look at Susano-o. Susano-o no Mikoto, Susano-o for short, Susan for shorter, is a storm deity from Japan. He is a kami, which is often translated as god, but that's not the most accurate description. Like with a lot of things from Japan, kami doesn't have a perfect translation into Western understanding, so when I call him a god in this video, keep that in mind. In the Nihon Shoki and the Kojiki, ancient Japanese historical and mythological text, Susano-o is a child of the creator deities Izanagi and Izanami, and sibling to the sun goddess Amaterasu no Mikoto and the moon god Tsukiyomi no Mikoto. There is a variant story in the Nihon Shoki that says that they had a fourth sibling in Ebisu no Mikoto, a god of fishermen and luck. Susano-o's name translates to impetuous male and is described by his parents as tyrannical. So that, along with the fact that he's a storm god, gives us a pretty decent idea of his personality. Angry. For the crime of being born like that, he was banished to Ne no Kuni. No, Ne no Kuni. Which is confusing. I saw it described as part of Yomi, the underworld, but also maybe it's the domain of the sea? I think the Yomi connection is better, as a variant of the story has him banished there after his mother died and he was just inconsolable. Susano-o has two popular stories about him. The first involves him and his sister Amaterasu participating in a competition of god-making, which he loses. His very measured response to this loss was to throw Ame no Fujikoma, the heavenly spotted horse, into Amaterasu's sacred weaving hall, after he had killed and flayed it. You see, stuff like this is how you get banned. Literally, as he's banished from heaven for this action. Because being banished to the underworld doesn't mean you can't go hang out in the heavens, apparently. Some of you may recognize this as the start of the story of Amaterasu in the cave, but I won't recount the rest of that story here, as she'll get her own video eventually. The other popular story is the slaying of the serpent Yamato no Orochi, which takes place after his banishment for the whole horse-tossing thing. After leaving heaven, he ends up in early Mytho-Japan, where he meets a couple who had 8 daughters, except 7 had been eaten by the giant 8-headed snake monster Yamato no Orochi. Susano-o agreed to kill the Orochi in exchange for the remaining daughter's hand in marriage. They agreed and gave him Kushinara Hime, whom he turned into a comb to keep her safe during the confrontation. Which is why she looks like this. So Susano-o builds 8 gates, each with a barrel of very potent alcohol behind it, and waits for Orochi to show up. When it does, it smells the wine, slips ahead into each gate to drink it, and gets wasted and blacks out. Then Susano-o kills Orochi, not by cutting off all the heads or stabbing it in the heart, but by hacking it to bits. No kill like overkill, am I right? This is when he finds a sword that he names the Ame no Murakama no Tsurugi, also known as the Kusanagi no Tsurugi, which is one of the 3 imperial regalia of Japan. And no, it's not a katana, this is pre-katana times. This tale is interesting as it falls in line with a number of other tales from around the world of gods, often storm gods, slaying dragons or serpents. You got Zeus and Typhon in Greece, Marduk and Tiamat in Mesopotamia, Thor and Jormungandr in Scandinavia. There's a lot. So many that there's a word for it called Chaos Kampf, meaning struggle against chaos. And that's Susano-o, Japanese storm deity and haver of zero chill. So how is he represented in game? Well, in P1 his design is something. Maybe the skull's representative of him being banished to the maybe underworld? Nah. The duality is better, I think. I'm not sure about the headdress, but the pattern on his cloak resembles water pattern, which kind of falls in line with the ocean associations he has. The sword would be a good addition, but it's not his sword, or the sword he found. It's the Shichi Shito, or 7-branch sword, which, as far as I can tell, doesn't have any mythological connection to him. So that's weird. This design carries over to P3, with him looking much more disheveled, matching his rough personality. In P4, yeah, I don't get it. He's the awoken persona of Yosuke, and it has an interesting design. The collar around his neck is modeled after a wind turbine, and is blowing his hair in a twister shape, which matches his storm association. And this might be a stretch, but the buzzsaw thing around him may be inspired by the idea of cutting wind, where wind is so strong it cuts through things. Golden gives him the ultimate form of Takehaya Susano-o, which is an epitaph given to him in the Kojiki, which apparently means brave and swift. In P5, we get some good stuff. He is the awoken persona of Yusuke, and his name is Kamu Susano-o. Kamu being an older Japanese word for God. And his design is very good. His lower body is covered in stylized samurai armor, and he has a menpole, or samurai mask on his face. His hair is swept back as if it's been windswept, and his cape is flowing in the wind. He doesn't have the 7-branch sword anymore, but this sword isn't really referencing anything that I'm aware of, and it's kind of just a stylized version of that sword. He's in the Chariot Arcana in P1 and the Duology, Fool in 3, Magician in 4, and Emperor in 5. Chariot works well in its reverse state, as it can mean forceful, aggression, hostility, and lack of self-control. Very fitting of a storm god. Fool also somewhat works in its reverse state, with recklessness and carelessness being represented. Magician, not so much. It can represent power, but that form of power is more of magical power, and Susano-o's is more of the power of nature, so I don't think that counts. Emperor, on the other hand, does work, but once again it's in the reverse form, as it can mean lack of discipline and tyranny. A bit on the nose there. His moves are pretty on point. In 1, his moves don't fit very well, but he does get a wind move. In the Duology, he gets electric moves, and specifically sword moves, because in those games, swords were their own damage type. 3 gives him no elemental moves, but focuses on slash damage. 4 reverses that and goes heavy on the wind moves, but also gives him Brave Blade. In Q1, it's back to wind and cut damage, and Q2 does the same thing as 4, loading him up with wind moves. And 5 does something a little different, giving him ice moves. This is unlike other games and almost seems out of place until you remember that storms can bring hail and sleet, and then it makes sense. He has a unique trait called Scoundrelize. This ability slightly increases allies' chance to avoid physical attacks. While I feel the effect doesn't fit very well, the title Scoundrel fits Susano. In P1, you can turn demons or personas into items, which I did not know about. And he gives Kusanagi's sword, an obvious allusion to the sword he finds in Orochi. The Duology also had this option, which I also didn't know about. What a fake fan! Shut up! In Eternal Punishment, he gives the skill card for Tarukaja, which is whatever. But in Innocent Sin, he gives the Heavenly Helm, which I can find no information on, but it's an obvious reference to him being a deity. In Portable, he gives a skill card for Vorpal Blade. Yeah, that's good. And you can't itemize him in 5, so he doesn't have one. Overall, I'd say it's pretty good. His moves do a great job of representing the storm god that he is. And while there's no solid physical form consistent across the series, I think that's fine. Storm is a very generic term and can take on many forms. And with transience being very prevalent in Japanese culture, it having deities changing shape makes a lot of sense. I was both looking forward to and dreading doing this one, because I know Susano-o has a bunch of different forms in a bunch of different games, and I knew it was going to be confusing. But it wasn't as confusing as I thought it would be. Eventually his siblings will get their own videos, also at least one of his parents. Also, he is the father or maybe patron of Okuninushi, who I didn't really mention in this video, but he'll get his own video at some point as well. So thank you very much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. Let me know who you want to see next in the comments down below. And I'll see you next time on Every Persona Explained.